My favorite time of year, when we deck the halls with blissful cheer. There's a wonder so divine that leads our hearts to realize it's all because of you. It's all because of you. Christmas is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Oh, it's all because of you. It's all because of you. Christmas is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Oh.
This is April,
And this is Tiffany.
and you're listening to the Tea of Life podcast, where we enjoy telling each adventure of life.
We hope that you enjoy listening today as we dive into this week's episode. Worship music is not a career choice, it's a calling. And it's one that worship artist Shelly Johnson has embraced with joyful surrender. Most well known for writing the powerful worship anthem, Power of the Cross, which has been recorded by Natalie Grant, Steve Green, and is being used in churches worldwide. Shelly has served as worship leader alongside Beth Moore, Tony Nolan, Andy Stanley, and toured North America with renowned Irish hymn writer Keith and Kristyn Getty. In September 2014, Shelly released her label debut worship album, Your Kingdom Come, in partnership with Lifeway Worship and Elevate Entertainment. In January 2016, Shelly released her follow-up worship album entitled Measureless, which debuted on the top 50 on iTunes, with the lead-off single, Loved Me First, hitting the #1 spot on Christian radio the first month. Less than 6 months later, in June 2016, Shelly released her first ever live worship album, Christ Be Everything, recorded and filmed at 1971 Sounds in Atlanta, Georgia. Shelly has just completed her first Christmas album, Christmas is Beautiful.
Yay!
And it's set to release October 20th, 2017, and will be launching a nationwide tour in November 2017. I can't wait to hear more about that. As Lifeway Worship's 2012 Songwriter of the Year, Shelly tours the country leading worship and striving to build the kingdom of God and serve his church through her music. Shelly and her husband Jack have been married 12 years and currently live in Woodstock, Georgia, along with their 2-year-old daughter, Mary Carson. So today we have Shelly Johnson on our podcast.
Yay!
And we're so excited to have her here with us today. So how is it having a 2-year-old?
It's, being a mom has totally taken me by surprise in a really good way. My husband and I were married 10 years before we had our daughter. We kind of found that once you've been married like past 5 years, like anything less than 5 years, like, oh, that's good that you're taking your time, enjoy this time. And then once we got past the 5-year mark, it kind of got to the point, people were like, oh, so do you want kids? And then once we got to like the 7-year mark, it was like, do you even like children? Do you want children? And so, yeah, we were just in a place where we were just traveling and just really enjoying life. And I had just turned 20 when we got married. So I was really young. And so I was in no hurry at all to start a family. And so I think there was always an element of fear kind of tied to that of, what if I'm not a good mom, or what if I don't like being a mom, or what if and so it just has totally taken me by surprise. I absolutely love it. It's so fun. She's so sweet. And it's just, this age is really sweet. She's just talking all the time and starting to repeat everything we say.
Right.
And just, it's like having a little shadow following you around.
So it's not the terrible twos, maybe the terrific twos?
Yeah, that's what we might be in for maybe the terrible threes, but yeah, we're not there yet. So fingers crossed.
I had always heard about the terrible twos when our boys were younger. And I never experienced the terrible twos. I loved them being twos.
Yes.
However, after 2, they turn 3. We'll talk when your child turns 4, and then we'll talk about the 3s. How about that? Some initial things that we wanted to ask you about is I mentioned about your Christmas album coming out. I want to talk about your career, and I want to talk about what led you here. But let's talk about your Christmas album. Let's do a little bit of a teaser at this point.
Yeah. So and it's funny because I know every artist says this about every album they do. So this isn't going to sound like, oh, this is so amazing. But I'm so excited about this album because I feel like musically and creatively, it's on a totally different level than anything I've ever done. The whole process, I think there's several reasons for that. One reason is I think a lot of my journey through music and a lot of what I've done has been in, worship music, church music. And I think when you're writing songs for the church to sing, you kind of get boxed into this mentality of, well, we have to keep the melodies really singable. We have to keep everything really simple because you want a room full of people to be able to learn it quickly and sing along, which is great for writing worship music. But with this album, I have a whole classical music background. I love classical music. I grew up playing Mozart, Beethoven, all those composers. I just love like the really beautiful, complex, just ornate side of music. And that's something that I don't really get to express or dive into very often in worship music. And so with this Christmas album, my producer Sean and I kind of said from the get-go, we're not going to have any rules with this album. We're just going to have fun, and we're just going to make music and be creative, and we're not going to try to box ourselves in to any certain thing. And so I think what's really amazing about how this album turned out is it's a really cool blend of lots of different, like, yes, we have like the modern worship, just the really straight ahead, like great worship anthems on there. But then we have these jazzy, fun, songs like Let It Snow and Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, where we hired these amazing jazz musicians that are just on a whole nother level musically than we are. And we just said, here's what we want to do. And they just did their thing. And then I got to just go sing a vocal on top of it and just have fun.
Right.
And so it was just really, really fun to get to be that creative and not feel like there was all these limitations like there normally are. And then there's these moments, having a love for piano and just that being so much part of my life. We have some songs that are just piano and strings and vocal. It's just like this beautiful, mesh of music. So it was just a really fun album to create. It was fun working on it. It's fun listening to it. And if you can say that after making an album, that's saying a lot, because when you're making an album, you listen to this stuff ad nauseum. You're listening to the arrangements when you're arranging it. And then when you're tracking it, you're listening to you listen to the songs like a million times, and then the mixing stage and the mastering. And it's just by the time you get actually finished and you have a finished album, you're pretty much sick of the songs.
Right. I agree. Yeah. Brandon was working, just a little side note, Brandon was working on an album one time with another group, and they had recorded it at our home, and then Brandon was mastering it at our home. And I heard this album over and over and over and over again. And I would go to sleep, and he would be still in the studio working on this album over and over and over again. And I was like, okay, if I have to hear this man's voice one more time before I go to bed at night, like, this is it. Like, I am done with this. And then when the album was released, I was like, nope, I'm good. Thanks.
Right. Yeah. So you totally understand just how that is. But that's actually been kind of cool because, when we finished the album, Sean and I both, my producer Sean, we were just like, we need a break from these songs. We're not. But it was really fun when, I took probably a month where I just didn't. But then because I ordered units, for the tour and stuff, we ordered physical units. And so one of my favorite things to do is when the physical units arrive from the manufacturer, I love to like open it and like next time I'm in the car, I put it in the car and listen to it. And it was so fun because I thought, I don't even know if I want to listen to this, but I just put it in and just kind of listened to it all the way through. And it was just like, wow, this was a really fun album to make because I really actually enjoyed listening to it.
I kind of feel that way about our podcast sometimes.
Yes.
Like sometimes I'll listen to it in the car. Sometimes I'm like, no, I'm good.
I'm good. I don't need that one. But when you're like listening to your own, like you said, you're like, I could buy this album. I mean, that's why would you have? I could buy this.
Yeah. But I think what excites me probably the most about it is I feel like it has such a broad appeal. Like there's songs that I think will really resonate with really devout, long-time believers. But I think there's also songs that will draw in people who haven't grown up in church or don't know Jesus, or, I think it has a really cool kind of broad appeal, which is different from anything I've ever done. Because all my other projects have been so just worship and very much geared towards the church. So I'm excited about this one.
I was listening to Angels We Have Heard on High. I could totally hear that twist that you had put in that song. And now that you're saying that, the Mozart background and stuff, like I can hear that in the song because I love what you did to that song.
Oh, thank you.
I love it. I just keep listening to it over and over again.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mine was Oh Holy Night. Just the very in the get go, and you have that whole intro with the keys and like I'm watching you in the video, like how's she doing that, and just how it's like tickling the ivories. You just come at it. I'm like, I love that total different way that you approached that song. And I was like,
thank you. Well, that one was a special one because that's my all-time favorite Christmas song. Oh Holy Night is yes. And so I knew, years ago when I even thought maybe one day I'll do a Christmas album, I've always known that song. But there's a lot of pressure that comes with that song because it's, it's a pretty epic songs. You can't mess it up. And, but yeah, that one was one that, I just kind of those chords and just kind of that vibe just was sort of what was in my heart to kind of, create with that song.
And that's the one that goes into Holy, Holy, Holy. That's the one that
The
goes
piano
into
version.
Yeah. And it dives into it. I'm like, I love that transition and how you arrange that. So yeah.
Well, we have mentioned that your Christmas album is scheduled to release on October 20th.
Which is crazy. It's fall.
That's awesome. And so then you're going to start a tour in November. Tell us about that tour.
Yeah. So the tour is actually something back in the spring, probably back in March or April. I just started reaching out because I've been traveling for several years and been to a lot of different churches. And so part of my dream for this album is just these Christmas nights of worship. And I kind of had this vision in my mind of sort of what I wanted those to look like. And so I started reaching out to just worship leaders, worship pastors, just women's ministry leaders, people that I've served with and done ministry with over the years, and just kind of been like, hey, would you guys be interested in, hosting a Christmas night of worship? And it was so encouraging, just the response that I got, just so many people excited about that idea and wanting to do something. And so we have about 10 dates this year that we're super excited about. Some of the dates are going to be band with the church's choir and orchestra along with us, which I'm really excited about because I just think that adds such a beautiful element of grandeur, to the music when you can have those pieces added on top of it. And then some of the dates are going to be more of kind of an acoustic-y band vibe, just sort of a unplugged kind of organic-y, rootsy kind of vibe. Yeah. And then some of the dates are are just more of like my band, and then their choir is going to sing along with us. And so just really excited about just the opportunities that we have to go to these different churches and share this music. But really just my vision for it is really just to create nights for people to just gather as church families and just sing these beloved Christmas songs that we all know and love, but also have moments to sit and have songs poured over them as well. So we have several dates this year. And then the thing I found challenging with Christmas is that because you have such a limited number of weeks, because it's Christmas tour, you can't really start till like Thanksgiving, and then it ends like for Christmas. And so it was challenging we had a lot of churches that were wanting the same dates. And so we weren't able to go to all of them this year. So we've already got several things in the works for next year's Christmas tour. So really excited about that.
And all the dates are on your website.
They are.
People, okay.
Yes.
So Shelly, what first got you started in music?
Yeah. So I think everyone that ends up being an artist of some sort, you kind of hear this common thread of, I've just always sung, or I've always been in music. And that's definitely true of me. I as long as I can remember, I always loved to sing. But my mom started to notice when I was really young, she always told this story about when I was probably 5 or 6 at the time. And the movie Pocahontas the Disney movie Pocahontas was getting ready to come out. And so they were showing previews for the movie on TV. And so she said, we were at home one day and the TV was on, and this preview for this movie comes on, and it was that big epic, have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue cornfield? Like that big epic ballad that every Disney movie has. And I just love that song. And then she said, I ran into the living room and sat at the piano and started singing and playing it. And she was like,
now you had never,
and I'm like 5 or 6. Yeah. And she was
6.
like, and so she walks in and she said, where did you learn that song? And I was like, oh, it was on the TV
just now.
And she said, well, I know, but how did you learn how to play it? And I said, well, she said, I just looked at her with kind of like this duh face, like, well, if you can hear music, you can play music. And she's like, no, that's not true for everyone. And so she kind of noticed at an early age, like there might be something there. And so anyway, I taught myself how to play the piano after bugging my mom to let me take lessons. And my older sisters took lessons and didn't really love it. And so my mom, being kid number 3, she was very hesitant to shell out more money for piano lessons. Yeah. And so she kind of kept putting it off. And so I just kind of taught myself. And then she said, okay, she's serious about this. So started piano and just always loved it. And then I started leading worship in 6th grade, actually. I remember sitting at this 10-foot grand piano leading chapel, sitting there leading worship songs for the school chapel, this little scrawny 6th grade kid with glasses and braces. And that's kind of where I started leading worship, and then led all through high school and college. And, But it really all started for me when my faith journey and music intersected was when I was 14, when I lost my dad to cancer. Because up until that point, my walk with God had been very much a cultural church thing because I grew up in church. I went to private Christian school. So I didn't really have any reason not to believe in Jesus. And so I just always did. And I prayed to receive Christ as a 6-year-old. But when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, it was just this devastating moment for our family. And it's interesting because when you're put in a position like that, you can go one of two ways. You can either run towards God or run away from him.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I chose to just run towards him. And I just wanted to get to know him on a personal level. And all the Bible stories and all the right answers and all the head knowledge that I'd grown up with was no longer enough. I needed just to have this personal connection, this personal relationship with God. And so it was during that season that my dad was battling cancer that just my heart was so broken, just everything that he was going through and just how desperate we were as a family, just asking God to do a miracle, that all those prayers and, my natural instinct was just to go sit at the piano and just play and just kind of let music be that outlet. And so what started to happen is, my heart and my prayers and everything I was feeling in my heart just started to meet up with this music that was wanting to come out as well. And so that's when I started writing songs. And then this is actually a really crazy story. So when I was a freshman in high school, my dad we didn't know he was in his last months, but he was in his last months. And my chorus teacher, I was the pianist for all the choruses at this big public high school. And my teacher was a believer. She was like 22. She just graduated from UGA. And so she knew about everything our family was going through. And so for whatever reason, she randomly would just say, hey, at the end of class today, why don't you take the last 20 minutes and just go sit at the piano and just share your new songs that you've been writing. And I'm 14 years old.
Wow.
And so here I am in this, 3,000 student public high school in this chorus class with Hindu kids, atheist kids, Muslim kids, just Jewish, whatever, people of all walks of life. And I'm just sitting at the piano, just telling them, well, this is what our family's going through. And this is what God's teaching me through this. And I wrote this song the other day about that. And I would love to share it with you. And so what started to happen is kids would start to stop me in the hallway, after that. And, all kinds of kids from different walks of life. And they would just start pouring their hearts out to me in the hallway, just crying and telling me that song you sang really ministered to me. And this is what my family's going through. And so it was in that moment that God really, a light bulb flipped on in my mind. And it was like God showed me for the first time, this is what I want you to do. I want you to use music as a ministry to help encourage people. And so that was just this very clear moment. And then the night that my dad ended up passing away was just another pivotal moment for me of just feeling so heartbroken and so let down and just, God, why didn't you heal him the way that we hoped? And why did this happen? And just feeling so confused and just trying to figure out where God was in this tragedy. And there was just this very clear moment of God saying, just continue to be faithful to me, continue to write songs for me, continue to just use your gifts for me. And I promise you, I'll use this for my glory and for your good. And so it was just this very clear, I mean, I know that's kind of unusual because, sometimes it takes years to kind of figure out sort of what your calling is. And it's definitely sort of evolved and adapted over the years, but I really have known since that moment, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm a very literal person. So I was just like, well, all right, that's what I'm supposed to do. So here we go.
That's what we're going to do.
So that's really just kind of where it all began and really how it all started all those years ago.
Did you ever take actual piano lessons or you just
I
always
did.
Oh, okay.
I started,
curious.
I did finally start lessons when I was 8. And then I just kind of played
So she was
through.
finally, it took her 3 years, but she was finally convinced
I think she's serious.
when you were 8.
Hone your craft. Because obviously you already had skill playing Pocahontas at age 5.
Shelly, tell us about your career journey through the music industry and how has that shaped you?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So I started out in 2008, my husband and I were living in Nashville, and I graduated from college. I went to Belmont University, graduated in 2007. And so right after I graduated, I knew what God had called me to do. And so I said, okay, well, and at the time, the artists that I really looked up to, like back when I was in high school, it was like Nicole Nordeman, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Michael W. Smith. It was like all those, and Passion. Like when I was in high school, Passion just was starting to become a thing. Like they just did their first album, and so worship music was really changing a lot when I was in high school and really starting to become more mature in my craft and in my faith and all of that. And so that was the picture I had in my mind of, well, if God's called me to do music as a ministry, then it must be an artist career like Nicole Nordeman or Stephen Curtis Chapman. And so that's really all I could envision, because that's what I thought of. And so that just seemed like, and so right out of college, I said, okay, well, what do I need to do in order to pursue that? And the first logical thing was, well, I should probably make an album of songs I've written. And so my last semester of college, I worked with a friend, and sonically it's very much a homemade album. It was made on a laptop in like a dorm room, and but it was a step,
You can tell that it was made.
And you got to start somewhere.
Yes.
But
Sounds like our first podcast.
I was like,
you got to start somewhere.
Right.
So I started, and then I just started reaching out to just over the last couple years leading up to that point. I had met, worship pastors and women's ministers. So I just started calling them up and, hey, I'm just trying to book a fall tour. Right. Would you guys be? And so I ended up having like 27 dates that fall of just women's retreats or Sunday night concerts or just different things. And so I just kind of started doing the music thing as best I knew. But then in 2008, so that was in 2007. And then in 2008, I wrote this song called Power of the Cross that was inspired from volunteering at a women's homeless shelter. And so this song really was just me at home one day, just kind of processing everything I had seen at that homeless shelter. So the song was just born one day. And I remember thinking when I wrote it, like it was just one of those moment songs. Like it was just for me and God, like it wasn't really ever meant to be, recorded. But I always liked to have record of stuff that I had been writing. And so I recorded a demo with a local producer friend in Nashville. And we just did a real simple demo. And somehow that ended up, I was working for a producer at the time. I was his personal assistant, and he was working on a record, and I had to drop off a hard drive to another producer. And in the process of all that, this other producer said, hey, can you send me some demos of songs you've written? I'd love to just hear. He starts asking me all these questions, and I'm like, oh, sure. Well, I'll just send you the newest one, and so I just emailed it over. And the next day I get a phone call from him, and he said, hey, I hope you don't mind, but Bernie Herms, Natalie Grant's husband, was over here yesterday working on something for her. And I played him your song when your email came through. And he said the hair on his arms like stood up when he heard it. And he like wants to take it home and play it for Natalie. And at that time, I was a huge Natalie Grant fan. I remember exactly where I was standing. I was sitting on the second step. I was sitting on the second step of the stairs in my house. And I just remember staring at the hardwood floor, just thinking, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. Because that was just such a huge honor, because Bernie's an amazing, producer, writer, stringer, just everything he can do. He's an amazing talent in and of itself. And then Natalie is a whole nother thing. And then, just the fact that they would even like something that I had written blew me away. And so anyway, one thing led to another, and she ended up recording it on her next album. And because of that, because of her platform and her influence in music, that song just ended up going all over the world just because of her releasing it and recording it. And so that was really when things kind of started to open up. There was this really crazy couple years of, there was a company over in the UK called Kingsway Music that they were talking to me about possibly doing like a publishing deal or a record deal. And then I was talking to another company called Centricity, John Mays and all them. And we were talking about doing something. And then there was just all this kind of, stuff happening, but I never had a piece about any of the things that were presented to me. They just didn't. I very much rely on just the peace that God gives me about things. And there just wasn't that peace there when there was all these decisions being made. None of those deals felt right. And my husband agreed. He's like, yeah, it just doesn't feel right. And so after about 2 years of kind of all this round and round, in 2011, I was approached by Lifeway Worship, and they're a division of Lifeway, like the big Lifeway. And they had started a music publishing division a few years before, and they're very much geared towards, writing songs for the church and sharing songs with churches. And so they had approached me about doing like this kind of all package deal of, partnering with a record label and then doing publishing, getting songs to churches, but then also trying to get me plugged in with some of their women's ministry events and different things. And it was this great idea and it sounded great. And so we decided to, jump in. And so I signed with them in February of 2011. And and it was just, it's one of those, I think that was when I began to realize how, things don't always pan out the way that you think that they will, or the way that even you want them to, or the way that other people want them to. And Lifeway started going through a lot of restructures and just a lot of changes within their organization. And so that just sort of started this process of things just kind of starting to feel like almost like they were falling apart a little bit. I remember when we finally started doing that first full album, the record label that we were partnered with, they were running into some financial trouble. And so they kind of went sort of out of business in the process of making the album. And so then that sort of put a hiccup in things. And then it's just been kind of a series of just different things along the way with either radio or management or just different pieces of the picture that, I've partnered with along the way, and it just hasn't worked out. And so it's been a really hard, that's discouraging when you're pursuing your passion and you're pursuing your calling. Anytime you partner with a company or a person that, believes in you and wants to help you, you put a lot of weight into that, and you put a lot of hope into that, because you get really excited about it, and you really get, excited thinking, oh, this is going to be great. Like, we're going to be able to, seek out more opportunities and try to help, grow this ministry. And so it's always hard when that doesn't happen, when it doesn't, really work the way that you want it to. And I think if anything that I've learned through that process of just kind of trying to navigate all of that, because meanwhile, all this is happening, the music industry is constantly in a state of flux. 2007, you think about from 2007 till now, how many record labels have gone out of business? How many radio stations have gone under? How many, music industry is just changing so much because of the whole digital and music streaming. There's just the money it's just so much harder to make money in the music industry. And so, all the while that I'm, trying to sort of get started in my ministry as well, all these crazy things are happening within the industry. And, so I think it's just been a really, I've gotten to the point now where since 2016, I'm just kind of back on my own independent, which has been great. But one of the biggest things that I learned through walking through that process is, the first thing is that nothing is wasted. That I think I was talking to a friend of mine recently who said that sometimes the things that happen in your life that seem like disappointments or seem like things that failed, she's like, those are actually could be things that God is protecting you from. She's like, God may very well be keeping things from happening in order to protect you for something else. She's like, so don't look at it as this didn't happen or this fell through. She said, look at it as God is protecting you for something that's next or something that's coming. And I just think there's so much wisdom in that. And I'm definitely starting to see that more and more. But I think, when you're in it, when you're in a place of, you're full of just heart and passion, and you're, being obedient to God's calling, it takes so much courage just to do that. And then when you're doing that, and then things start to happen that just don't go the way that you want, that's really hard. It's really hard to process that. And it's really hard to figure out, okay, what does this mean? Is it me? Am I not supposed to be doing this? And I think there comes in a lot of self-doubt, a lot of questioning, a lot of, well, what am I doing? And so I think for me, I've always known what God's called me to do. And so if anything, going through all of those ups and downs, I think just further solidified that. Because I think when you go through challenges like that, the only way that you can keep persevering is if you truly have a passion for it. And that was something that never went away. Like the more things would just kind of, oh, well, that didn't work out. It was like the more passionate I became, like it never affected my excitement level and my passion for God's call in my life, for music, for worship, for writing, for none of that was ever affected by any of that. And so that was a big clue to me of, oh, okay, maybe this this is my calling. I just need to just stay the course. And I think I've realized over the last several years just the power of showing up every day.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a worship leader friend say a few years ago, there's a lot to be said for just showing up every day.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we get these ideas about life that every day should be like this amazing thing, like, oh, this happened today and this happened today. And
Right.
but I think a lot of life is just doing the work. It's just waking up and showing up and just staying faithful to what you did yesterday. Just do it well again today, and just keep plowing the field and keep doing what you're doing. And so if I could sum up what I believe to be, I guess, the formula for success.
Tell us. We want the formula
I
for
would
success.
say small steps of faithfulness that add up
that.
over time, just continually saying yes, continually doing a good job, continually showing up, continually being faithful to whatever task is put in front of you. And I think when you do that over a long time, like years and years and years, I don't think you can avoid success. And so I think for me, I'm kind of in the middle of, I've just come out of this season of just a lot of things that didn't exactly go the way that maybe we thought 5 years ago they were going to go. But now I feel like I'm in this new season, just on the brink of something brand new with this Christmas album and just these new opportunities that are opening up and new relationships with more churches, and just all of that is really exciting for me. And I can see so much growth just in the ways that I've been able to grow over the last 5 years because of everything that happened, that I would not have been able to grow like that if it had been easy, or if things had just gone the way that, we thought that they were going to go.
Right. So what are you most passionate about as a worship leader in the church today?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is something that really has become clearer to me over the last couple of years. I kind of my eyes really became opened several years ago to kind of this dynamic that I see happening in a lot of churches these days, which is like this, there's like this, I hate the word controversy because it sounds so intense, but tension, controversy, dilemma, whatever you want to call it, between, some people call it the worship wars, where it's like, you have, this mentality of, we're going to do very traditional, like hymns and and then there's like this whole new modern worship movement. And so many churches are struggling with where to fall in that debate of what do we look like? What do we sound like? What kind of music do we do? And it just really started to break my heart the more churches I went to, and I just saw the division that it was causing in the church. Because when you think about, when I think about the early church, like the New Testament church, I picture people gathering in homes and them sitting around, in a circle and just singing songs together. And the whole purpose of singing songs is to sing truth over our lives that speaks truth into our hearts, to remind us, to keep going and not get discouraged, to remind us of this God that we trust in. And the power of doing that together is, it's like this collective hallelujah of like, we all believe this and we're all going to encourage each other in this truth. And so it's just sad to me that there's a lot of places, that a lot of churches that they're kind of, instead of bringing everyone together in one room, it's like we're offering 3 different rooms. We're offering, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I know in some churches it works great and people love it. And but I just think there's something really powerful about a church coming together and singing together and worshiping together, like all different ages, all different demographics. And so something that has really sort of come to the surface for me is just this idea of bringing generations together in worship. And so whenever I'm asked to do an event or to plan, a women's conference or, a night of worship, I try to be really mindful of, like, I want to sing songs that I'm 99.9% sure that everybody in the room is going to know. Right. And so, and that's, sometimes that's hard because, they might, but even if it's, maybe it's a newer song that maybe some people in the room might not know, I try to bookend that new song with like super familiar songs that we all know. And it's just something that I try to be really, really mindful of and really intentional about. And that's why I love, a lot of these, what we would call modern hymns that are starting to come, like Cornerstone, for example, that by Hillsong. It's one of those songs that the verses are the solid rock, my hope is built on nothing less. And it's, it's the lyrics from this older hymn. So a lot of people are already familiar with that lyric,
Right.
but then it's presented musically in a new and fresh modern way. And then there's this new chorus. So it's like, even if people might not know the chorus, they still know that verse. They still feel like they know the verse
Right.
because
Feel
the words
connected.
are familiar. And so it's a connecting point. And so I love, incorporating songs like that. But also taking, older, like Amazing Grace, a song like that, and just doing a fresh version of it, just the same lyrics, the same melody, but just sharing it, in a new way. I just think that helps draw people together. And that's something that's been really neat over the last few years. That's the main comment we get when we do events, is from women's leaders or church or pastors, or that's the main thing they always comment on, is like, I love how you just blended everything together and just were able to, engage all of us. And so that's what really gets me excited, because I want people to be able to sing along, and I want them to be able to be part of. I don't want them to just be watching, and I don't want it to just be like a spectator event. I want it to really be, I want them to really feel like they can engage in worship. Because I've seen in my life how worship is transforming, and it's powerful. And sometimes you don't feel like singing, you're going through whatever you're going through, and you don't feel like singing these words. But once you choose to start singing them, then you start to feel like singing them. And so it's like your heart starts to, your brain starts to tell your heart how to feel. And then your heart catches up and begins to, oh yeah, I do believe this. And I do, and I just think that's powerful. I think that's the powerful thing about worship, is it's just always refocusing our hearts where they need to be.
And you're singing in faith. Like you're saying, if I don't feel, I'm having a bad day, I don't feel like singing a worship song right now, because it's not about us. It's about the Lord. And so we're going to sing that in faith. And like you said, the emotions will catch up. And I think that even though He knows our heart, He knows our weakness. And yeah, that's one of the things that I just love about God, is that I don't have to fake it. I mean, I can just be honest and be like, you know what, I really don't feel like doing this thing right now, but I'm going to worship, because I know that it's truth, and it's going to, like you said, singing it over us, and we just connect.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned Natalie Grant and Nicole Nordman, but who are some of your musical icons or influences along the way?
So my entire childhood, I'm a huge Celine Dion fan.
Okay. Have you seen her in
and
concert?
I'm not ashamed to admit it. Yeah. So yes. So when my husband and I lived in Nashville a few years ago, that was one of my, I was like, one day we have to go to a Celine Dion concert. And so she was coming to Nashville, to the Bridgestone Arena, which is like the big concert arena in downtown Nashville. And so we went, and it was just, I was just in my zone. But yeah, I grew up, I even had her French albums from when she was 10, 11, and 12, like the albums. But I always just loved her voice. Like it just always captivated me from an early age. And so yeah, I loved listening to her. I loved, listening to like Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey. All the big, pop icons were definitely a part of my playlist.
I'm not noticing any Christian artists listed in that.
Yeah, I would say probably when I started.
Well, Nicole.
No,
yeah,
I'm kidding.
you do sound like when I was listening to it, I could feel that.
Yeah,
I was like,
Nicole was a huge. She was a huge influence, because right when I was going through all that with my dad, when he got diagnosed with cancer, and when I started writing, she was like, I was listening to her music all the time, and so I think her music had a really big impact on just the styling and just kind of the melodies that I naturally gravitated towards, and kind of the chord progressions. So yeah, from a Christian music standpoint, I would say her and Stephen Curtis Chapman for sure, just because I always loved his lyrics. I just felt like he was an incredible songwriter. He is an incredible songwriter. And he was really
he just came out with another album, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, he's like, he's like one of those that's just like, he's a legend.
He really
he's going to be
is.
wringing songs until his last breath.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. So, but that was really inspiring for me as a young, brand new writer. It's like, man, that's what I want to shoot for. So it was definitely a good thing to shoot for. He's one of the best.
So whenever you do a performance, what do you do in order to kind of rejuvenate yourself?
Yeah, I think it depends on like what the event is. Like if it's, I think I really enjoy, like, oddly enough, I enjoy listening to like really good like messages, like just clips of messages that like really are very inspiring and really speak a lot of hope and a lot of truth, because that gets me really kind of fired up to go out and sing about that same hope and that same truth. So that's something like I'm a big podcast person. Like I listen to podcasts and
Do you have a favorite? I mean,
oh,
aside from
Tea of
ours,
Life, of course.
Yeah. Good job, Shelly.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to like all kinds. Like I listen. There's this. I love like Dave Ramsey's Entree Leadership podcast.
Oh, yeah.
They just interview so many great people on there. Meg Meeker is a doctor
Dr.
who
Meg.
talks a lot about parenting, and so I was introduced to her through listening to the Dave Ramsey show, and so I've started listening to her podcast. And there's another guy named Ryan Hawk who has a podcast called The Learning Leader. That's really really intense, like really great content. It's very intense, and he interviews a lot of great people. So I like listening to stuff that just inspires me to be better, like challenges me to think differently about things and inspires me to just try to do things better than I'm currently doing them.
So besides music and family, do you have any other passions?
Yes. So my husband and I love to travel. We love to travel. That was also part of the reason we waited forever to have a child, because we just like, that was like our thing. Like we've been so many fun places. Well, part of it too is he works for T-Mobile. So he's in that wireless, crazy wireless world, which is super fun, but it's always changing. And so because of that, he's always had to travel, like not every week, but he's had to travel quite a bit. And so he's, years and years and years ago, he became a Marriott guy and a Delta guy or, Southwest guy. So he started earning, the points or whatever. And so we were able to, use a lot of those travel points. And so our whole marriage, I mean, one of our favorite things to do is sit down and like look at the next year and be like, okay, where do we want to go? And just like map out our trips and where are we going to go? And so we've been to Italy, we've been to Austria and Switzerland, we've been to Hawaii.
So just the two of you.
Yeah, we've been to.
So you're not talking about like mission trips or anything like
No,
that.
these are just like
this is just you and your husband
these are just
going
like
to these
the two
places.
of us just traveling. Yeah,
That
I mean,
sounds so amazing.
We've been skiing in like Whistler, Canada, and Tahoe and Vail, and we've been to all these different beach, wherever the Marriott is, all these places in the Caribbean, all these beach places, and we love to see just parts of the world, and we're big on like nature, like we love like the Northwest, like Seattle and up there where you can go hiking in the mountains, and we're just really big on that kind of stuff. So that's our, other than being home with family and doing our careers, which we love. That's our next thing that we love to do is travel.
So hiking is in backpacking hiking or just
we've never like done the full intense like backpacking spending overnight. Although
Marriott, remember the Marriott.
Oh yeah, I know she said the Marriott.
But I would actually love to go camping. I've never been camping.
Are you serious?
Like sleep outside in a tent.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
We need to take you camping.
Yes, I really want to do that.
I'm your girl. I can do
Do
that.
a women's retreat outside. You can sing.
I know. I would love to.
Yeah. So I've heard a story about your husband is a little bit older than you, right? And apparently you guys were friends, your families were friends ever since you were a baby. And there's actually a picture of your husband holding you as a baby.
Yes. So our grandparents were friends, like Jack's grandparents and my grandparents. The old Baptist Tabernacle in downtown Atlanta. You know how at churches, there's always those people like, oh, they've been here forever. They're super involved. That was our grandparents at the Tabernacle. And so they like taught Sunday school together and they were really good friends. And so as a result of that, our parents, grew up at the Tabernacle together and in the youth group. Our moms used to go to like youth camp together, room together. And so our parents were just always really good friends. And my mom actually introduced his parents. So like my mom and his mom were like best friends. And then my mom knew his dad from like other circles of people. And so when they were seniors, his dad, Lon, needed like a date for some function that he was going to. And my mom said, oh, you should go with my friend Rue. Like, I think you two would get along really well. And so, the rest is history. So she kind of set them up on their first date. And so, so Jack and I are about 8 years apart. And so he's the same age as my oldest sister. And then I'm the same age as his middle brother. His family moved around. Like we always lived in Atlanta, but his family moved around a lot. And one place they lived was Oregon. They lived in Portland, Oregon. And so when I was born, my parents had a trip planned because back to the travel thing, like I think that love for travel came from my dad. He loved to travel. So we traveled all the time growing up as a family. And so they had this trip planned like to Lake Louise and, Northwest. And so because Jack's family was living in Oregon, they're like, oh, well, on our way back, we should stop through Oregon and go see the Johnsons. And, and I was 5 months old. And so we just have this picture, like Jack and my sister are sitting on this, this very 80s, like, couch. And they're sitting there and Jack's just like holding me, just sitting there like, and
Sweet.
so yeah. And then we have a really disturbing picture from a few years later when Jack and my sister, they were seniors in high school and they wanted to go to prom, but neither of them had a date. So they're like, oh, why don't we just go with each other to each other's proms? And that'll be fun. We'll just all go with a group of friends. And so my sister went to Pope and Jack went to Walton. And so they're like, we'll just go to each other's proms. So they had the picture party at our house. And, in my fourth grade mind, I'm like, oh, everyone's taking pictures with Jack. Like, I want to get a picture with Jack. And so we have this picture of, he's like 6'4" and senior in high school. And I'm like this little, fourth grader, with, ponytail and just buck teeth and, just scrawny legs. And, we're standing there and just smiling. And, and little did we know how creepy that picture would be all these years later. So we fast forward, we kind of talk about this. We were actually talking about this the other day. Like, we're actually a lot alike, like as people, like when you look at like our life stories and kind of, we're very much alike, just the way we think and the things we gravitate towards and all that kind of thing. And so because like Jack always thought like he would, because he always had moms trying to set him up with their daughters. Like, because he's just always been a really great guy.
Nice
he's just
guy,
always been just a really, walk the narrow road,
Stand
just
up
very,
guy,
rule follower. He's just a good guy. And so when he was in high school, there was all these moms like, oh, you need to date my daughter, and he just, was never interested in anyone. And then, so he always thought when he went to Auburn University, and he always thought, oh, when I get to college, like there's a lot of great Christian girls at Auburn. I'll meet someone there. Well, then he never met anyone. And so people just gave him such a hard time. Like, you're never going to meet anyone if you don't start dating. But he just always had this sense of like, well, God's going to bring the right person at the right time. And then, from where I was, I going through everything I went through with my dad, like I really grew up a lot in my faith during that season. And so my mom always used to say, she's 13 going on 35. Like she always said I kind of had an old soul. And so I was just, once you go through something like that where, you're watching your dad just die in front of your eyes, it's kind of all of a sudden the things that I did care about as a 14-year-old, they just didn't really matter anymore. Just all that trivial stuff, I saw how trivial it was. And so it kind of just put me mentally in a different place. And I just started to think very future focused and future minded. And so, so I started just thinking about like, well, who do I want to marry one day and what kind of person? And so it's kind of funny because, the kind of person that I always envisioned was someone like Jack, because he was just always a part of our family and my mom always loved him. And, I knew he was such a great guy. And so I was like, well, whenever I start dating, I'm just going to compare everyone I meet. I'm just going to compare them to Jack. And, because that's how I'll know. That's how I'll know if they qualify, And, but never thinking like it could be Jack. And he certainly never thought that. And then it was just one of those things that after he graduated from college, he moved back to Atlanta and was working for T-Mobile, but he was volunteering in the youth group, leading Sunday school and different things. And I was leading worship for the youth group. And so we were both, we were there early. We had to stay late. We were just involved at church a lot. And so we just kind of struck up a friendship of just, because when he left to go to college, I was still, in like middle school. And now I was like halfway through high school, so I hadn't grown up a lot in those years since he left. And so we just really started to connect just on a friend level. Just, we were reading a lot of the same books and we felt like God was teaching us a lot of the same things. So we just had a lot to talk about. And then it was just kind of this natural, I think it freaked both of us out because neither of us, I think we both started to develop feelings for the other, but neither of us wanted to say anything because it was just like, well, it can't be you, that's just weird. And the whole age difference thing. And there were just so many things. We were like, well, that can't happen. And then God just made it really clear. Like it was very much a God thing of just, no, like, this is it. And so, so we actually realized that when I was a senior in high school. and he was 25. And
Wow.
that was so what we decided to do, because we wanted, we just didn't want there to ever be any question about like the purity of our relationship or anything. And so we decided that even though we knew how we felt about each other, that we were just going to wait until I was officially like out of high school and like headed to college to start actually dating. So we just kind of pretended like we were just friends and like, our families would get together and like me and my mom would go over to their house and have dinner and we would just hang out with the youth group and just do stuff with friends. And so we still got to spend time together, but we just didn't treat it like, we're dating. And which actually was really fun because then once I did graduate from high school, we made like a really big deal about our first date. We got all dressed up and because I never went to prom or anything because, my boyfriend was this 25-year-old that no one knew about. And so it was like super weird. And so we just got, made it really fun and got all dressed up. And then it was cool because that was right when I was, moving to Nashville to go to college. And so when we got, and he was actually already in Nashville because he had gotten transferred there through T-Mobile before that. And so, so then it was kind of like we were in this new city and like nobody knew us. And so we could just be like a normal couple, just a normal dating couple, and that was a really fun season of life, just getting to, kind of date for the first time. And
fresh start.
Yeah. And so then we got engaged at the end of my freshman year of college, and then we got married at the end of my sophomore year of college.
Exciting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shelly, this has been amazing. Thank you so
Thank
much
you for having me.
being here with us today. We loved hearing your story.
Aw.
And you are such a delight and
Well, so are y'all.
inspiration.
I'd love to have you back again at the next CD. Like if we could always help you promote your CDs, because there's going to be many, many more.
Aw.
That's
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate
Yeah.
your time.
Well, thank you.
That's it for today. Tune in next time as we continue to dive into life.
In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. You can find us at teaoflifepodcast.com or follow us on Instagram at teaoflifepodcast.
Until next time, in the words of Monty Python,
Make tea, not war.
My favorite time of year, when we deck the halls with blissful cheer. There's a wonder so divine that leads our hearts to realize it's all because of you. It's all because of you. Christmas is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Oh, it's all because of you. It's all because of you. Christmas is beautiful.
Well, April actually has some really good stories about you.
I have some personal. Shelly, my family went to East Side. My maiden name is Stippick. My brother, Paul Stippick. My cousin, Elaine Wilhelm. I asked them for some little tidbits.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So, yes. So when,
wow.
when she sent me your information, and I was like, so, because I didn't recognize Johnson. And I was like, hey. And I went to your website, and I saw the part where you talk about your dad, and I was like, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. I'm texting my mom. Who's the girl with the great voice?
Oh my goodness.
So I asked, let's see if I wrote some stuff down. Okay,
Wow,
so
small world.
yeah, so very small world. So my family, like I said, went to East Side. So Paul, all that.
We're in the youth group together.
Yeah. So I asked some stories, and they would
no.
they shared about going on mission trips. And I mean, they're like, they always both of them said mission trips. They always remember mission trips. And Elaine was like, her and Laura Ward Godfrey, always sing, and that you guys knew like the qualities of who you wanted to marry, or maybe even knew who you wanted to marry at that point. But always, just the stuff that you talk about. She said, always singing.
We drove people crazy. Every time I run into someone that knew me in high school, I feel like I need to apologize. I mean, we were pretty annoying in high school. We were, well, I'm sorry.
That's your passion, and that's what you. So she said, always in all caps, singing.
Sorry, Elaine.
Okay. Oh, and she said, you could talk about how she knew she would marry Jack even when she was in high school and he was a youth intern. So I remember I would go to a couple of the Wednesday nights or whenever we met. I remember being a part or seeing all the kids, and I loved I loved that group. I loved Eastside, and I loved the youth group, and that's what really made me think this is great. This is why you need a big youth group.
We had a great group. There was like a few years there where there was something about
The
these
Steve
few
Dusek,
years
Jonathan
of-
Spiva.
Yeah,
kind
like
of era.
just that group of those were just so many great kids.
And the couples that came out, I mean, just
Yeah.
anyhow, that's
Yeah.
totally different. But it's okay. So Paul was remembering some of the high school songs that you wrote. Like both of them said she knew who she wanted to marry, or characteristics of how you knew you're going to marry
That's funny.
Jack. And I remember was he duct tape boy or masking tape man? My mother has a picture. I cannot find it.
It's still sitting in our attic. His costume.
Could you believe that? Yeah. That's hilarious. So I had this.
Yeah.
I was telling Tiffany I wanted to find this picture. It used to sit right on my mom's refrigerator.
Good times.
Good times.